Peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Folks, we got a lot to talk about. First and foremost, the big political story out of Chicago. Mayor Lori Lightfoot has been ousted, as now there's going to be a runoff election, and she is not going to be a part of it on April the 4th. We'll break down the details. Also, it's Women's History Month. We're going to do our part to celebrate women who tell their stories. That's the theme this year. We'll have that conversation. Plus, we get some updates about what's going on with the Supreme Court and their student loan case that they're reviewing. So we got a lot to get to. Of course, you're going to be a part of the conversation, and we got our fantastic contributors. So stay with me. We're going to have a fun time today. Happy Wednesday, folks. It's all happening on today's edition of The Culture here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Folks, welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii Muhammad. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'm looking forward to hearing from so many of you this afternoon. All right, folks, let's jump right into it. We got a lot of conversations set up for you, and as you know, here on Wednesday, I'm just not by myself. I got my sister, who is an attorney, who is a TV host. She hosts her own show called Suzette Speaks on YouTube. We got my sister Suzette joining us in a few moments as we have these conversations. The big one, though, the first one, is about what happened in the city of Chicago as Mayor Lori Lightfoot has officially been ousted, folks. Take a look at the report that has come out now and where the city of Chicago stands on their mayor's race that happened yesterday. And it was a very, very decisive, it was a major decision that the Chicago voters had put out there, saying that Mayor Lori Lightfoot just didn't do enough for the city. Take a look at this, folks. Paul Vallas and Brandon Johnson will meet in a runoff to be the next mayor of Chicago after voters denied incumbent Lori Lightfoot a second term. Now, Vallas is a school CEO backed by the police union and county commissioner endorsed by the Chicago's teachers union. They both advanced to the April 4th runoff after none of the 9 candidates was able to secure over 50% of the vote on Tuesday to win outright. And so Lori Lightfoot, she's the first Black woman and first openly gay person to lead the city. She won her first term in 2019 after promising to end decades of corruption and backroom dealing at City Hall. But opponents blamed the Lightfoot for an increase in crime that occurred in cities across the U.S. during the pandemic, and criticized her as being a divisive, overly contentious leader. She is the first elected Chicago mayor to lose a re-election bid since 1983, when Jane Byrne, the city's first female mayor, lost her Democratic primary. All right, I want to bring my sister Suzette Speaks into the conversation as we look at what's happening in the city of Chicago. She's hailing all the way from the great city of Miami, Florida.
Yes, 305 in the
How you feeling this afternoon?
Wonderful. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Shout out to the Culture crew watching live and team replay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So, Suzette, Lori Lightfoot, she was always somewhat of a controversial figure in Chicago politics, but now it has been decided. Lori, Miss Mayor Lightfoot, thank you for your services. You will no longer be needed here.
It was a rough night for former Mayor Lori Lightfoot. When I looked at the numbers, Farajii, we're looking at 17% of the total votes. She came in third place behind those 2 front runners, as you described, who will go on to the runoff election on April 4th. But yeah, the top 2 vote getters were at 34% for Mr. Paul Vallas and 20% for Brandon Johnson. So them combined is more than 50%. So this was definitely a message that was being sent by Chicago voters. And unfortunately, it was not her night.
No, and it's not her night at all. And I'm wondering, what does that mean? Because we often talk about Black folks in power, particularly, positions of power like, state legislator or even mayor, in some cases governor. So is this a way of is this any type of rebuke about her personally, you think? Or is this just based upon how she has, structured the government and how she runs the government?
Well, she's definitely a strong mayor in more ways than one. People have criticized her style. Uh,
Okay, you were
Can you
breaking up a
hear
little
me?
bit.
I'm
So Zach,
sorry. Shout out to Struggle Streaming. But as I was saying, was that crime has been up in her city. So as far as her personal leadership style, that definitely has come under critique as well. People have said that she's a very strong and assertive, kind of top down, strong leader. But she cannot deny the numbers. When people feel unsafe, they're going to, show up at the ballot box, and they did. In the last year, crime has been up in Chicago, according to some reports, about 31%. So she has had an uphill battle since the 2020 uprising in that summer, where people, saw all over the news the burning of the business districts of downtown Chicago, and how they had to kind of quarantine off certain areas. But people apparently did not like how she has done her job, more so than I think what she is like on a personal note, or on a personal level. But yeah, I think there was a little bit of both. But I think they definitely sent a message that they want to change in leadership, for sure. But unfortunately, it seems as if, her time was cut short. As you stated, the first time in 40 years that a sitting incumbent has not been reelected to office.
So here's the pushback I got on this, right? Because we often hear that when crime goes up, somebody's getting kicked out. Some heads are rolling, right? And I'm from Baltimore, and so we know a thing. I know a thing or two about rising crime and the consequences of that. But it never made sense to me, though, Suzette. It never made sense because we always put, and I hate when politicians do this. They put themselves, and I'm speaking of mayors, whether they're black or white, it doesn't matter. But mayors often put themselves as the savior of the city. And crime is not, you can't quote unquote legislate crime prevention. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can put certain things in place for the police department, but it still comes down to people's thinking, people's behavior. There are other internal factors within a person that causes them or compels them to want to commit a crime, right? And so, I think part of it is this idea, like, we as voters and constituents have bought into the idea that if you got a mayor, that they're going to stop crime because that's what they say. But then all the other part of it is the candidate, the political leaders saying, well, I can do that. And it's like, no, that's not realistic, right? Like, crime comes down to prosecution. You're an attorney, you understand. Prosecution, making sure the charges stick, make sure that the police officers are doing what they're supposed to do and not, causing any type of corruption in the case. I mean, there are so many other things. And I think that it's this poor policy for a political leader to put out there that they're going to stop crime. And then for us as the voters, we accept that and think, oh, well, they didn't stop crime, therefore they lost they didn't fulfill that promise. It never made sense to me.
Yeah, it's a tall order to say when you have resources that are dispersed differently, right? Chicago sometimes is called the tale of two cities, a well-funded side and a not so funded side. You also have, as you said, several moving parts. I would include in there the police union and other right. Mental health services, which she had worked to increase funding for young people. Of course, you have economic factors, joblessness, homelessness. I mean, you and I both know, we hear the songs about Chirac and other places in Chicago, and it's not an easy fix for anybody, much less, one-time or single-term mayor to try to come in and really revolutionize how people think of even themselves. So, yeah, to put that on as a kind of a way in which you're going to distinguish yourself as a true leader, it is very difficult. She needs or needed partnerships that run very deep. And even when I look at some of the ways that she has been depicted on social media through memes and even just seeing her at on the street, if you will, while she's walking around the city, et cetera, there didn't seem to be, oftentimes with young people, like a mutual respect there. And I think sometimes we overpromise, underdeliver, and I think that might have been part of her issue when it came to crime. But I think across the board, we also have to recognize during the pandemic, major cities, it's not only Chicago, which is our third largest city here in the United States, across major cities went up when the pandemic hit.
So here, and we got the word, the youth vote.
Or we as constituents think that the mayor can do more than they're able to do.
Yeah, so I didn't mean to interrupt, Suzette. Just wanted to because I'm getting you a little glitchy, so I was like, let me jump in. But
sorry.
That's all good. But here's the thing, and we're going to take a quick pause after I make this. But again, crime is not predicated on who's mayor. Like no criminals running around like, oh, so and so is mayor. Yeah, I can't do it, bro. I can't do it. Like nobody's thinking that. But the other part of it is the point that you just made. Crime has gone up across the country. And see, this is part of the problem. I think this lies on us as constituents / voters. We have sometimes, I think we have unrealistic expectations of what a political leader can really do. So we put it all on the government and not thinking about, you know what is the role that I can play to help be a partner with my government? That's the part. How do we become partners? Like we have become so conditioned, and this is not because of our fault. This is over years and decades of conditioning in America that if you have any need, if you have any issue, go to the government and they will fix it. Versus this new paradigm shift that we're slowly accepting, which is if you have a need, then get up off your ass and help and make something different, a different reality. That's a different type of citizenship. We've had a passive level of citizenship in this country for so many years. Now, when a moment like this happens, when you have all of this upheaval and partisanship and all of this stuff happening within government, it's like it's very hard for people to jump into becoming an active citizen where they're seeing themselves as partners with the government and not just constituents. So, I got to take a quick pause. I'm going to let you respond to that. And of course, crew, I want to hear what y'all got to say as we talk about this big story out of Chicago. Mayor Lori Lightfoot is out. She did not run her re-election bid. But what's your take on how people feel about crime and her being able to not live up to the expectations? Join us in the conversation. Post your comments in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Stay with us. We got a lot to talk about here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is roland@rolandsmartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking about Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who has lost her reelection bid in Chicago, Illinois. Now, the city is now looking to April 4th, where there will be a runoff election between Mr. Vallis and Mr. Johnson. And it's a way for people to see that the work that the first Black openly gay mayor, woman mayor, has been able to do and not do has caused a lot of rift in the city of Chicago. And so we've been talking about this election and more importantly about the implications of, I've been talking to Suzette Speaks, host, TV host and attorney about the situation. And then we're going to get into some of your comments from the crew. All right, so Suzette, my point is that this thing about the crime and everything, this has been happening all over the city. I mean, all over the country. So it's like we've gotten to this place where we want politicians to say, "Oh, abracadabra, crime is solved," and it doesn't work that way.
It's not realistic, but the voters spoke with their votes. They really, the person with the most votes, the 34% that went to Paul Vallis, he's much more conservative, and people who criticize him say that he might be too conservative for a majority Democratic-leaning city. And the person who came second, Mr. Brandon Johnson, who got 24%, he is actually left of Mayor Lightfoot. He is more liberal than her. So she had opponents that came through on her right and on her left that left her kind of sitting in the middle with very few people that felt that she apparently had the answers to crime and other issues, but mainly crime. Many have suggested is the main issue that voters really took issue with her with in terms of the election. So I understand what you're saying fully, Farajii. This one person, the mayor of any city, needs partnership, needs resources in order to fight something as large as the entrenched gang culture and economic challenges across her city. This is not something that really can be cured in 4 years. And again, you had a pandemic right smack dab in the middle that she had to also contend with people, all over the country had, these issues, this increase in gun violence as we've seen across the board. But yes, I agree with you fully that there's no one person that can resolve this for any city. But unfortunately, if you don't feel safe, you vote accordingly. And as I said, for the person who is much more conservative, he has the backing of the police union to get that 34% to her 17 says a lot. And he's quite conservative.
I know. Look, let's keep it 100, Suzette. When you say it says a lot, that means it's a little speculative, a little suspicious.
Well,
because police unions, let me tell y'all folks, and for those who may not know, police unions ride with the police until the wheels fall off. Unfortunately, these unions were created at a time in the 50s and the 60s and during the time where police brutality, of course, was happening. But they are for the interest of the cop. They are not for the interest of the community. They're not for the interest of the city. They don't give a damn about some of, the circumstance. They're for the interest of that police officer, and they're going to ride with the officer until the wheels fall off. And so, yes, I would be suspicious. You have a police union that's like, no, that's my guy, because then I'm going to be like, oh, boy, when them cases come up, when those police brutality cases or other questionable cases come up, who is going to stand on the side of right? Not about the victim and the community. No, who is going to stand with right? And if a police officer is wrong, is the union really going to stand with that officer? And guess what? Most of the time they do. I've seen it in Baltimore and other cities. They stand with the officer. The officer can be wrong as 2 left feet. They'll stand with that officer out of duty to protect that officer. And it's absolutely insane. So I'm giving the same eye as you gave, Suzette, on that one. Mark, let's go to you. Checking in. You said, with those off the rack suits and no solutions, but a million excuses as Black kids died weekly. Well, again, we got to become active citizens.
We don't have to do any personal attacks though, Mark, by her outfit.
I mean, it could be personal attacks, and guess what? And here's what's might going to happen. And you tell me if I'm wrong about this, Suzette. You get the next mayor come in, whether it's Vallis or Johnson, crime still goes up. Now what?
They gonna turn it and blame her. I inherited a mess. Like,
it's like you're in a bad relationship. You're like, oh, I got out the bad relationship, and you attract the same exact type of person that you just got out the bad relationship with.
Basically, yeah. I mean,
and then you be like, well, see, it's them. No, it may not always be them. It might just be us not taking our citizenry well enough to become active in putting the fire of accountability, the fire of responsibility under the asses of these people that stand before us.
Yeah, I think it would need to be a coalition of people, grassroots folks, people who know the neighborhoods. I don't think you can have an outsider come in and necessarily eradicate crime in Chicago. It is just deeply entrenched. There are parts of that city that are just, for decades now, been under almost a plague in terms of the death of young Black men being a constant within the certain boundaries within the city. So we know that she tried her best, but again, with the pandemic, she also had issues not only with the police union, but with the teachers union. Chicago was one of the last places to reopen their schools as far as major cities are concerned after the pandemic. I don't know if you remember, there was a huge strike that was covered nationally where Chicago teachers went on strike, and the teachers are actually supporting her other opponent who would be in the runoff, Mr. Gibson. So neither of these major unions took her side in this election.
Let's go to Chicago, because Pepe Akins, thank you so much for checking in. You said, I'm in Chicago. Vallis is the Make Chicago Great Again candidate.
I tell you, very conservative from what I've read. Yeah, very conservative. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm wondering, the other part of it, Farajii, when you have 9 people in a race, it's going to split the vote. And that's what happens to her. So sometimes it's not even a rebuke of her, but when you have 9 people that siphon off these little, amounts of votes, you're just not going to be successful.
Truth is power. You said, my God, you said they spoke with their vote in this situation. I wish they would, that we would speak with our vote every time. You said every time, and get yourself registered, self-educated, and vote all positions. I mean, people spoke. Look, here's the thing. People can vote for who they want to vote for. The fact is you got out and exercised and vote, right? So if you don't vote for my candidate, I can't be mad because you didn't vote for my candidate when I'm encouraging you to vote. That's the way you think you vote your interest, hopefully. So that's fine. But I just think that in order for us to get off this vicious cycle, that we should really look at the candidates and think in terms of the long haul, Suzette. You know what I'm saying? And not just think, okay, here's what I often see, especially when it comes to like crime, that we want to a la carte a candidate and be like, oh, he's strong on crime. But the other parts of that candidate's agenda might be terrible.
Exactly.
We're
afraid. We're so afraid. We need.
It may not be in the best interest, but you be like, he's good on crime.
Yeah.
But what about education? What about healthcare? What about constituent services? What about building relationships with young people and seniors in the community? Like looking at all of these other pieces, you'd be like, he's good on crime. What about economic development for small businesses and Black-owned businesses and women-owned businesses? You know what I'm saying? Like, where do the candidates stand on those things? I mean, if it comes down to figuring out, okay, you got these 2 candidates, you're right, and you mentioned it, 9 candidates, nobody's going to sit around and try to look at the agenda of 9 candidates, right? Some of us may, but not a lot. Mm-hmm. So if you got these 2 candidates, now you can say, okay, which candidate speaks to me and which candidate doesn't? And it then kind of worked it that way, becoming more informed as you're talking about using your citizenry. Am I crazy in this thinking this? I'm like, I feel like
no, yeah, I have to.
Like what?
Yeah. If you're anti-Lori, you have to be for someone else. So you have to be very careful.
I'm not even. Of course, I lived in Chicago for 1 year when I was 18 years old. 1 year, from 18 to 19. But I mean, Chicago always has a special place in my heart. But at the same time, You know, you're not going to get if you want a transformative political leader, you're going to need a transformative policy. You're going to need a certain type of person. May not be Lori Lightfoot, but Chicago deserves, especially black folks in Chicago. Black people in Chicago have struggled so much. That city is huge, third largest city, has a lot of money that comes into the city. If you go to the south side, if you go to the west side, you know what I mean? There are parts of Chicago that looks like hasn't been renovated in the past 30 years. So, you know, it's like, we got to really think this thing through.
Yeah, we're going to have to, whoever wins, for people who live in Chicago, I act like I live up there, but we're going to have to proverbially speak of the voters get out. There, like I said, it's a distinct vote between Paul Vallis and Brandon Johnson. So you're going to have to make your voices heard. If you know that one seems to be leaning again on a single issue, and we don't really want to be, as you described, single issue voters, we have to look at the totality of where their policies are and see if they're going to serve our communities. So we got to really look at that. But again, you have another crack at the apple, a bite at the apple, Chicago. So you will need to get out and get your friends out on April 4th.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, let me get one more in. Alf checking in. You said Vallis was in charge of school district of Philadelphia when it had been taken over by the state. He drove resources out the district. Who vetted his resume?
Yeah, he's a former, we call him superintendent down here, but the head of the school district there. And some people have questioned. Again, he's flip-flop even in his party. When Obama came in, he became a Democrat. There's some history there. People need to research and see if you were satisfied with the job he did while he served as head of the school system there in Chicago. There's a lot. He's been around for a little while. He ran for also governor. He ran for lieutenant governor. So he's not new to the game. So
again, I question people like that, Suzette.
You got to look at the track record.
Like that. If you ran for 3 and 4 different positions, I'm like, nah, dog. And it's like back to back every year you running again. Hey, I could be your prosecutor. Hey,
right. It's almost like I could be
not saying him, but
I could be you want to stay relevant. Yeah, exactly. There are people in Miami like that. Trust me. I'm like, what they gonna run for next? And it's like,
right.
There are people in Baltimore
that was like that. I remember. It's like one guy. He ran for like 2-3 different positions, and it's like, bro, you seem like you're more hungry for power than it is for wanting to serve the people, and that's a problem for me. So we will have to see. Of course, April 4th is just around the corner, so we're going to have to see how voters in Chicago are going to move forward on this. But it is official. Mayor Lori Lightfoot has lost her re-election bid, and we will see what the vision of Chicago will be coming up. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, me and Suzette will continue to chop it up. Stay with us. We got a lot to get to here on the culture right here on the Black Star Network. We'll be right back.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Your money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland@RolandSMartin.com. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now
We have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
An angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
All right, folks, welcome back. Have you ever heard of the term white flight, where there are that term was often used to describe the large population of white people who have moved out of the city into the suburbs as a result of many factors, from crime to taxes and a whole lot of other issues? Well, there is something that's happening in the city of Atlanta that's taking white flight to the next level, where white people and white residents are not just leaving the city of Atlanta, but they're looking to establish a whole new jurisdiction. This is the situation in the case about what's happening in the community of Buckhead, which is currently a part of Atlanta, and how two bills are looking to create a separate jurisdiction for this affluent community. Take a look here, folks. This is what's coming out of Atlanta right now, according to the latest news, that these two bills together would allow the Buckhead district to succeed, not just leave, succeed from the city, pass the Georgia Senate Committee Monday, and could be up for a floor vote as soon as Wednesday. If approved by both legislative chambers and signed by Governor Brian Kemp, who is a Republican, the measures would allow residents of the roughly 24 square miles, 62 square kilometers, Buckhead area to vote in November 2024 on whether to leave Atlanta and form their own city. Now, while the Buckhead City movement has a powerful backer in Burt Jones, the state's lieutenant governor and state senate president, the measures are expected to face resistance in the House. Let's bring my sister Suzette back into this. Suzette, you brought this to my attention.
Yes, sir. What's going on, ATL? I see the Chicagoans are in the chat heavy with the Mayor Lightfoot. So we're glad to have you here, and I can't wait for ATL.
Here come Atlanta. Here comes Atlanta.
We're going to make everybody mad today, but we got to talk about it because this is a huge deal, guys. We're talking about nearly 1/5 of the population of Atlanta, and about 38% of the tax revenue would leave this city if the Buckhead city is allowed to be formed by the state legislature. So there's so much pushback. I know that the mayor there, Mr. Andre Dickens, is firmly against this, as well as many others, mostly Democrats, are saying, what are we doing here? Why would you just allow this majority white and quite affluent side of town to just up and leave? There have been rumblings about this happening for several years. Actually, from when I was a little girl, I heard this as a rumor for years and years, but it never really got serious traction until about maybe the last cycle of elected officials. It was the state senate president before now, as well as the House of Representatives chairman in the state legislature of Georgia, that kind of knocked it down and didn't give it life, but now it has life. So it's a bill. It has reached committee, come out of committee, can be voted on by the Senate and the Georgia House, and may be signed by the governor. But this is highly unprecedented. It has never been done before, and many are questioning exactly why and why now.
So that's one of the questions that I have, which is why now. But the other question is, so you can really do this?
Well, it takes an act of legislation from the Georgia State House and Senate. But yes, technically you can. They make special districts all the time. But yes, and give cities charters all the time. It's possible. I know.
I'm trying to process this here. I'm smiling, laughing, but folks, I'm really trying to process, because here's my question. So white people feel like, hey, the city is going to fill in the blank, going to hell, it's full of it, blah, 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 blah. And now they're wealthy enough to actually get some proposed legislation to be considered by the state. And they may actually have it on the ballot come 2024 if the governor, who is a Republican, who's a part of that class of people, white and wealthy, if they actually
yeah, it would ultimately be decided by the voters. Yes, sir.
Oh, right. You gotta include us somewhere in the mix, right? Okay. But my thinking is, does this open a door for us to have a real conversation about Black people becoming more independent?
Well, I don't know.
I'm saying, because we have wealthy Black people.
But the political prowess. Remember, a lot of people think that Atlanta runs Georgia, but you have a lot of money coming from the rich and very well-to-do farmers and agricultural-based landowners in South Georgia. People try to tie everything to Chocolate City, but South Georgia is very strong politically, and oftentimes the state legislature there in Georgia reflects that. So we would have to still have the political leverage to get those things passed in the Georgia State House and the State Senate in order to kind of have that type of conversation. But what I want to also address here is, just like with the Chicago scenario we just talked about with last night's election, the C word, crime, is what has been put forth as one of the major reasons why this is appropriate or even necessary, according to some proponents. So we're seeing that as kind of this, I would say, dog whistle to a certain extent. Others would just say, look at the numbers, which is true. But we are going to have to kind of debate whether that should mean actual secession, as opposed to having other ways of addressing that, if that is the issue really at hand. The other thing I want to bring up, Farajii, is that this special new city district would also have the land that within its boundaries that would be designated, or is being kind of disputed and fought over right now, to be designated for that large cop city that it has been, in the news, where they're trying to develop a huge training facility for police officers. And there have been even one gentleman who was killed while protesting on that land a few months back. But yeah, there's so many other kind of intricacies that people are wondering what's really behind this move and why now.
So one of the big things that has been talked about this, and you mentioned this, and also this has certainly been a part of the rumblings for years, right? Like, they have been talking about seceding from Atlanta. But according to the reports, it shows that crime has been the determining factor for this new level of momentum that we're seeing. That now people in Buckhead, the residents of Buckhead, are saying, look, Atlanta is getting too violent. Atlanta is becoming a real problem. And so the police district is keeping Buckhead safe there, but the rest of the city is suffering. And so crime is pushing this. And again, folks, this is my view of crime, is that it's more of a personal human thing rather than a political social situation. Like the way we're looking at crime might be the wrong way of looking at it. You know what I mean? Because we can put more police out there. We can have round the clock security in certain neighborhoods. We can have all of this new technology. We can have special training and all of these things, but you're not dealing with the very essence of crime, which I truly believe is how people think that a person can go from calm to violent in a matter of seconds in America. And as a result of that, we're doing like a lot of external, putting bandages on a situation instead of getting to the root of the wound, which is people's imbalance, which is people's view of how they see themselves, which is, so many other complexities to that. So it's like, are we really addressing the crime situation? You can't run from crime until you start to deal with human development and human behavior. And I feel like the reason that we don't talk about that, because it's not sexy. It's not easy to put into a package. It's not easy to put into a soundbite. It's like, oh my gosh.
It's not easy to legislate. It's not
easy to legislate. Mm-hmm. But we're exposed to violence from politics, from policy violence to systemic violence. We're exposed to violence every single day that we're alive. And I'm talking about Black folks and other marginalized community. So now you get a surprise and you're afraid because now we're violent when your policies and your systems are violent themselves. Like, it doesn't make sense to me. So we're not getting to the root of the problem. You can run as far away. You can go into the hills of Hollywood, and for all I care, guess what's going to happen?
It's going to follow you. You can't stay on your perch forever. Yep, absolutely.
You can't just be like, I don't want it, so therefore it's section me off from the rest of the city. The other part of it is, very quickly, is the tax base and the ratings of the city. Yeah. The ratings of the city will actually go down. According to Moody's Investment Services, it said in October that Atlanta maintained a AA1 rating on the city's approximately $650 million outstanding general obligation unlimited tax debt. So you have, the ratings are still strong. If you have that many people moving out of the city, the rating is going to go down. The credit rating situation is going to change in the city of Atlanta. I mean, this has major implications, Suzette. Major implications.
Yeah, when you look at the tax revenue, 38% of the total city's revenue comes from this nearly 1/5 of the land area and population of Atlanta. So when you're allowing cities to kind of remove themselves or kind of section themselves off and become new cities, again, that outstanding debt, remember, cities issue bonds in order to raise money for capital improvements, education, what we're talking about, the things that are needed, to hopefully keep people out of the street and the crime rates down. It actually might change the rating for all cities in Georgia if there is an uncertainty about whether the city will remain intact and therefore be able to pay its debts. So yeah, that credit rating, I think there's $650 million outstanding right now in IOUs for the city of Atlanta. So yeah, this would affect that tremendously and kind of leaves the rest of the folks, the 4/5 of the population, kind of on the hook for that remaining debt.
Absolutely. We got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we'll continue the conversation with Suzette and, of course, with you. Post your comments in the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can as we continue to talk about the white and wealthy are calling for the succession from the city of Atlanta. Wow. And guess what, folks? And this may not be the only city that this is happening in. Wow. Stay with us. That conversation continues right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
All momentum we have now We have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Table. With me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Farajii Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking about what's happening in the city of Atlanta, where white and wealthy residents of the community of Buckhead is looking to succeed from the city of Atlanta for a number of reasons, mostly because of crime, and looking to establish their own jurisdiction as an independent city. Now, this comes as a result of two bills that have gone before the Georgia Senate Committee, who has approved the move, and now it moves forward to the other part of the Georgia process of political process. And if that's approved, it goes to the desk of Governor Brian Kemp, who has the opportunity to sign off on it, and then it will be up for on the ballot come November 2024. And this is creating a firestorm of controversy where people are asking, can this really happen? And if it does, what will be the implications of it? We've been talking to my sister, Suzette Speaks. Suzette, so when we talk about everything from credit ratings, when we're talking about everything from the crime piece, we're talking about all of this. Again, I'm just going to throw this question out there. Why haven't Black people been able to do this? You said political prowess.
Yeah, I don't see it kind of bending that way. I see it more so as being a possible dangerous precedent for other more affluent, predominantly white areas around our country in various municipalities saying, we don't want to be a part of every, city. But we all across the country have very affluent parts and more economically challenged parts to a lot of our cities. That's how it has been as far as a kind of remnant of, the racial segregation that we've suffered for so long in our country. And of course, economics hit different communities differently, depending on your levels of education and opportunities, et cetera. Right. So imagine, I looked at it more so as this being possibly a precedent for other very wealthy, for example, parts of Miami or wherever, to just get up one day and say, no, we're no longer, this specific neighborhood is no longer part of the city of fill in the blank. And what that would mean for cities across the country. As you mentioned, coming off a break, we are seeing something similar happening in Mississippi. It's a little bit different, but where they are now in their state legislature taking up possible legislation to separate out districts for judicial districts for predominantly white, more affluent areas, to separate them in terms of who the judges are and who selects those judges from the predominantly Black cities in Mississippi, for example, Jackson, right? So I'm more concerned looking at it from maybe not how we can possibly utilize it. And I think I'd have to give that a little bit more thought, but I'm seeing it as like, if you have an affluent side of town that has the political leverage in a state capital, they could possibly start making enclave cities. And I think that could be very, very dangerous for us.
Very dangerous. Conscious Thought thinks along the same way. Conscious Thought, my guy, you said if Buckhead is able to succeed from Atlanta and Jackson, Mississippi is able to carve out a niche Caucasian enclave, then watch out and wait for the ripple effect. Nationwide, everyone will want to do it, except for Black people.
That's what I'm saying. But we don't necessarily have, the power of City Hall in each and every city.
We don't. But even in the cities and the states that we do have Black leadership in City Hall, we're not even thinking like that.
I don't see how necessarily it would benefit. I don't necessarily.
I'm just saying, like the same way, the same reasons that these white residents are saying, "Hey, crime is up," blah blah blah. We need to take our talents elsewhere and establish our own jurisdiction. Black people can say the same thing. We have wealthy Black people. We have Black people who are in positions of power. They could do that. They don't have to do it exact same way. But I'm just saying, just the thought that, hey, you know what?
Whatever group.
And create my own thing. The reason is because how many wealthy Black areas do we have in the cities across this country?
Yeah, I was thinking that.
I mean, like little enclaves.
Yeah, majority of our cities are not where you have predominantly Black neighborhoods.
Right.
Happen to be maybe middle class equal to, or some may be a little bit more affluent, but the majority possibly, I don't know the numbers, are not necessarily going to be the higher tax base. Exactly. So if you separate from other parts of your city, you probably will lose out in terms of your tax revenue and other advantages. So I'm not sure, again, how it would serve parts of towns that are economically deprived who also happen to be in various circumstances predominantly Black.
Even in cities like here in Los Angeles, Black people only make up 8 to 9%.
Yeah.
So if that 8 to 9%, say you should shave off 4 or 5% of the 8 to 9%, where they say, hey, can we create a own situation? And I'm just using this as a hypothetical example, right? Like if we create our own situation, that shouldn't be frowned upon because we don't have the quote unquote the numbers to show that we're a majority. In some cities where you have Black people that are 40, 50%, in Baltimore it's like 65%, when you have the numbers is one thing, but when cities where you don't have the strong numbers of Black folks compared to other folks, then it could be a possible option. And again, I understand your point in terms of the politics, but I'm just saying, even getting down to the very essence, which is the thought, like, hey, you know what? We're wealthy. We have some level, we have privilege. We have power, people that represent us in the state government. We can do this. Black folks, we unfortunately have to just be resolved to, okay, we got to live in this condition. And that's a different level of thought. That's all I'm saying.
I understand your point. My biggest fear for something like this is this will become segregation by another name. We're going to say.
That's what Janelle said. That's what they know.
It's like a high crime, it's high this, it's high this, and then you separate people, and it happens to be all white people end up here and all Black people here. I'm not for that.
That's what Janelle said. She said they can actually they are actually legislating segregation and calling it special districting. So here's the thing. If there was, and I think we got this again, this goes back to our race conversation in America. If there was a very real, honest conversation about race, where we're saying, okay, as Black people, we bring this to the table, and white people are saying, hey, this is what we're willing to bring to the table, and we both keep our promises. There could be some actual coexistence. But if you have some cities, and this is the thing about segregation and integration, Black people have tried to live with white people tried to live with Black people, but for a number of reasons, it hasn't been working. Now, it hasn't totally disrupted the country because that's the state that we're in. But is it a real situation, or is it something only compelled by law?
No, I don't want to paint all residents in Buckhead with the same brush, right? Because there are people who have political capital who money can, move votes.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that every white person within Buckhead, and there are a lot of black people that live in Buckhead too, that they feel the same way about this, right? So we have to be very careful not to kind of attribute to some, for all, having the same sentiment. So I don't think everybody necessarily agrees with the move out, but the powers that be, the people who have the political influence, the people who contribute to campaigns and obviously can muster votes in the state house and the state senate, are loud enough to where they are through the state legislature. Again, this is not the voters at large yet. This might be defeated if taken to the voters, citywide. But we got to be very careful. Like I said, I don't think necessarily everybody holds this same sentiment. And I also think that if we look at it kind of for I don't know how much progress we would make. And then people would have to have the bigger conversation is what does progress look like to you and what does progress look like to me?
That's true.
As far as what would be beneficial to our communities as a whole. I just don't know if, just economically thinking about thinking about other resources. I'm just thinking about cities here in Miami. I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want us to separate out because it just depends on how much money and how much political influence you actually have.
And culture.
It could be a very divisive,
there's an economic piece to it, but then the cultural piece, and I think that's the other underlying thing that Buckhead is probably saying culturally, Atlanta and the direction that Atlanta is going, culturally there's an influx of new black folks that have moved to Atlanta as a result of a variety of factors now being called Black Hollywood in some cases. So, culturally, Atlanta has changed. And some of those white residents could be like, you know what? I don't want to deal with that. And that's fine. That's cool because every community have their own culture. But now it's getting to a different place. And so when you have a situation like this, it's like you, regardless of whether you actually feel like, oh, no, I'm not doing this because I'm racist, or I'm not doing this because I don't want to live around black people, or I don't want to, I think I'm better than the mainland or whatever the case may be. But it's hard to differentiate those persons from the persons who are moving forward with this effort. And if you're in the city of Buckhead, if you're a white resident, are you going to leave Buckhead and say, no, I'm moving back to Atlanta? Or are you going to be like, it may not be a bad idea? I don't know.
We'll have to see. I think we got to
We will have to see. This is interesting, though. I'm so happy that you brought this to our attention. So this is very interesting. I'm going to keep my eyes on this. Folks, we got to take a quick pause when we come forward. It is Women's History Month here with March 1st, and we're going to talk about what it means, and more importantly, what's the theme for this month's celebration. Stay with us. That conversation is up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now We have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, today it is March the 1st. It is the first day of Women's History Month, and this is the month where we talk about the great accomplishments and celebrate the great triumphs that women have made for this country, and there are so many stories to tell. And this is why the National Women's History Alliance, this is one of the major organizations that help to spearhead the effort to declare March as Women's History Month. This is why today they have officially said that the theme for this year's celebration will be celebrating women who tell our stories. Now, let me just share with you what the National Women's History Alliance have put out there as to what we should be celebrating during this month. Take a look at this. This is from their website, but they said throughout 2023, the NWHA will encourage recognition of women, past and present, who have been active in all forms of media and storytelling, including print, radio, TV, stage, screen, blogs, podcasts, and more. The timely theme honors women in every community who have devoted their lives and talents to producing art, pursuing truth, and reflecting the human condition decade after decade. Oh, well, first of all, I'm so happy that today landed on the first day of Women's History Month, landed on Wednesday, because we want to celebrate Suzette Speaks.
Hey, let's go.
Hey.
Happy Women's History Month, everybody. It's a beautiful time of year where we get to share stories and celebrate. Yeah,
right, so Suzette, looking at this month is talking about, women telling their story. How does this resonate for you? Why is this so important?
Well, it's super important. I was trying to look up some numbers as far as pay in terms of what a man makes.
All about that money. I hear you. You've been on that money.
We've made so much progress, right? Pay equity is one of my key issues. And again, it can be difficult to track because so many people, their salaries are kept hidden. And I see a movement now moving away from that. But nonetheless, according to some reports, women on average, and I think that includes all races, make about 82, some say 84 cents for every dollar a man makes. And there has been a lot of progress. And I think the storytelling aspect of what we can do through this month is going to be super powerful, because I think a lot of times within our multi-generational society, people who might feel as if we've come far enough may not really truly understand the sacrifices and the distance that we've come and in such a short period of time. Yeah. When I'm thinking about how, the 50s and the revolution there, the birth of feminism in I think it was the early 1900s. The first Women's History Week was actually by the Communist Party here in the United States back in, I believe it was like 1904. And it was Women's History Week for a long time until I think Jimmy Carter still had a Women's History Week. And then in the 80s, it became nationally Women's History Month and now celebrated across the world. So it did start here in the United States. But of course, there are also various stories about the origin as to where it came from, why we chose March. And I've read that there was apparently some sort of suffragette march or riot back in the 1800s, but some dispute whether that even occurred or whether it was made up to justify the celebration. So we've gone from a day to a week to an official month that is signed in or recognized by each and every president each and every year. So yes, the storytelling for me is super important, because I do think we have a lot of unsung heroes. And again, from all economic backgrounds, all ethnicities, walks of life. There are so many stories that need to be told about women overcoming the odds and making progress in whatever way they see fit. So I think this is a wonderful time of year. I'm big on celebrating it, and I'm an event producer myself, oftentimes putting together events. But I think the storytelling theme is quite appropriate.
So the other part about the whole storytelling theme is women often aren't seen, especially Black women, right? Black women aren't seen enough. We don't know the struggle, the path, the story that Black women have to take, or the stories of Black women who have made great contributions. So when I was reading about this theme, I was like, this is perfect, man. This is perfect, especially at a time where so many people have made these generalizations about who women are. And I'm not just talking about Black women. I'm just saying women in general from all different backgrounds. You know, we think we know women. And I'm saying as a man, we think we know women. We think we got y'all all figured out and stuff. But y'all very... Is
that possible? No.
No, it's not, Suzette.
Clearly, we're complex. We're very complex.
Y'all too complex and too layered. I like when sisters, and I hear sisters say this all the time. I am very low key.
You're like, actually,
I am low maintenance. You know what I'm saying? I don't ask for a lot. Like,
oh my!
I just want you to give me the world. That's not asking for a lot. What's the problem? I want the sun, moon, and stars.
Right? Not all of us, but
it's
yes.
The issue. I just want you to submit to my feet as a god.
Well, there's that. There's that. Sound like a podcast right now.
Right. Yeah. But no, I think it's important. Stories. Here's the thing about stories, and which is why I think, even here on Black Star Network, this is why we're talking about the power of the story. Stories open us up to understanding a person. When you have a good story, when you hear a person's story of how they got from point A to point B, it makes you have a greater either respect for that person, a better, compassion for that person. Like, you know what I mean? Like, people don't know your story, Suzette. Like, I'm sure you have a very, very important, interesting story, right? If people sat down and kind of chatted with you, like, Suzette, how did you get to this place? How did you become a lawyer? And all of these things. That story, your story alone would be so powerful. They'd be like, wow, I didn't even know. Exactly.
Absolutely.
But to see the story, and this is the beauty, to see women tell their stories in the media space, especially like from podcasts to film, TV, and these things. I mean, we're starting to see Hollywood is slowly turning to women to hear their story. And I think it's an important move for so many Black women. Very important. And I hope that a lot of sisters out there who watch the show understand that your story matters. It absolutely is critical. Like, if we don't know your story, like, I loved when I remember as a child hearing the story of how my mother grew up and how my grandmother grew up. Those stories were very interesting to me. And, as a child, you like 6 or 7, you like, what? Like, my grandmother would be like, you were born back when dinosaurs. Like, but to hear her story, it just made me feel a greater admiration for who she was as a woman. Because, yes, she's grandma or she's mom, but then you start to see the other side of her. It's like, no, this is the so-and-so, the woman. Not just as the mother, she's the woman. And that means that makes all the difference in the world. We're going to take a quick pause. When we come back, I know you got something to say, Suzette, so I want to get your thoughts on that. And, of course, crew, I want to hear your take on this as well. So stay with us. More about Women's History Month and this year's theme, celebrating women who tell their stories. What are your thoughts? Stay with us. This conversation continues right here on the other side, right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig? When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We're talking about the first day of Women's History Month, which is actually today. And this year's theme is celebrating women who tell stories. Yes, yes, yes. Women who tell stories. I got a woman who tells stories all the time. I ain't talking about stories like she's lying. I'm talking about stories of other women and other people who speak their truth. My sister Suzette Speaks, TV host and attorney. But Suzette, I wanted to get your take on that, you know, the importance of telling stories, like really giving people an understanding about who that woman is beyond just the roles that we might see. And I'm speaking of the story, the women in our families. She's not just your aunt. She was a woman before she became your aunt.
Absolutely. I used to hear some of my relatives say, I wasn't always old. I wasn't born old like that. Because I think sometimes, and I think within my own work, having put together events around Black women, Black judges, women judges.
You be doing it too, Suzette. I checked you out. You've been doing this for years. This ain't because
the power. It's super important. The power of narrative is where we get to see ourselves, where we get to identify with a person that, again, if a big old, judge feels like this about motherhood or about being single or about whatever she's going through, oh man, that makes me feel a little bit more normal, like someone else has the same experiences as I do walking through this world. And it's super important for us to be able to see one another's humanity, right? And sometimes, especially when we deal with like elected officials, people who are sitting in these high places like judges, you don't think that they are human. So we are all human first. So that's why I really believe in the power of narrative. And I would also like that for this month, for us to focus on sharing stories within our own families, as you mentioned. I think there are times in which I look around and I think some of the stories that should be passed down have not been. And of course, sometimes they can be quite painful. Some of our families have gone through, some serious trauma. And I think there was this whole trend post segregation to kind of talk about it a little bit less and to live in the present. But I think there has been a kind of renewed awakening to how important it is to tell our stories of our individual families, what mama them was like, what great grandma them was like, how they cook, how they, pass along culture in language, in food, and how they dressed, why they dressed that way, how they worshiped even. And there are so many parts of our culture that I think, especially nowadays where we are so inundated, or younger people are so inundated with culture via social media, it's super important now that we sit down and we actually tell them what we've been through, so that there's this continuity in terms of the messages that we carry. They're not dying and they're not being replaced by ones that don't serve us.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the important part of this. Let me get a couple of comments from our crew here. And, there are some actual colors and some things that we can start to do to represent and to celebrate this month, folks. I'm going to give you a couple of ideas as well. But Lana, my sister, who is one of our loyal watchers and supporters here at Black Star and the Culture. My sister, you said stories do matter. My grandma's story saved my life. Come on, Lana. Come on.
My auntie just got off the phone with me yesterday telling me about a big cousin and something that happened to her. And wow. I was like, whoa, really? She was like, don't do it. Don't do it. Because
and I'm glad you brought that up, and Lana brought the same point up. Like, now that I have a daughter, And now that, and even when I was growing up with my sister, you know, having like when my mother was alive and then my sister was around, like that level of connection, being able to like, you know, being able to like talk about those certain stories, right? When my grandmother on my mother's side was very close to my family. So she raised me just as much as my mom and dad. So, you know, hearing those stories, right? And learning those lessons from grandma and from auntie. I mean, this stuff it empowers. And as a boy growing up into a man, you know, and I will say this, like, you got to listen to your grandmother. Like, you know, there's that old thing, Suzette, and I'm sure you heard this, that if you want to choose a quote unquote good man, see how he treats his mother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds about right.
What's the relationship that he has with his mother? What's the relationship that he has with the women in his family? You know what I'm saying? And that may not always be true for every man, but it's just
within reason. We know everybody's, you know, not perfect, and you know, you have mama's boys, but within a healthy reason.
Within a healthy, within a healthy space.
Yes.
But it just goes to show you, like, these stories are important, and so I'm happy that there is a celebration of that. Now, how do we take that to, not from our individual families, but to mass media? You know what I'm saying? Like, now we got podcasts, we got films, we got TV. You know, when I was reading about this, I was thinking of, like, you know, of course, like Angela Bassett or Viola Davis, or, you know, the women that we often talk about. But there are a number of women I'm seeing, like women content creators, women directors and producers, women who are carving out a space for these stories to be told. And I think this is the thing that's going to move people and change the culture indefinitely. What about you? Do you think the same?
Yeah. People have taken notice. Non-traditional media has been our best friend, Issa Rae, and many others like her who have gone on. I mean, I love Yvonne Orji's podcast, her and I forget the other sister's name. But there's so many people that have a platform now where there is no, you know, gatekeeper to tell us, oh, we're going to buy this project or we're not going to buy this project. Well, if it's in your heart to share it, you might as well just go ahead and find a platform that works for you and go ahead and do that. This is a part of our tradition, Farajii. This is African oral tradition that we are just inheritors of and perpetuators of. So within our own, like I said, families, but yes, within the mass spaces that YouTube provides and other platforms now provide, super important that we take advantage of those. Record your grandma them. Put it out there. Make sure those stories don't die. I have an older aunt that we keep saying we need to, you know, ask her about everything with the family. Those are things that are so super important. And I love it when I see, for example, pieces from like Henry Louis Gates. I don't know if you saw the latest Finding Your Roots and things like this. This is super important that we can talk about our culture in such, you know, unique ways. Now that we have this opportunity through, you know, social media and mass media and non-traditional media. So we got to take advantage of it. And especially if you're feeling called to present it to the masses, do that. Record the folks you love or set up some kind of scripted, you know, pieces, etc., and poetry and other things that are just a part of our oral tradition that we need to make sure we create as much space as possible for, both online and in, you know, public events. Go support your public events this month as well, if you can.
Oh, no doubt. You got to definitely do that. Tiana,
support a women-owned business too. How about that? So.
Oh yeah, women-owned businesses.
So much we could do. So much we could do to celebrate.
Oh my gosh, that is an excellent idea. There are so many sisters who are entrepreneurs as a result of the pandemic, as a result of the changing works culture that we've seen in this country. Women-owned businesses is everything, right? And if you see women in the arts, women that do media work, this is the time that you know, let people know, like, hey, yo, check out this podcast. You know what I'm saying?
Support my YouTube channel like that.
Check out this YouTube channel. You know what I'm saying? So, you know, it's there's just so many things that can be done.
It costs you nothing to like and to share or to subscribe. So support somebody else.
Absolutely. Tiana, you checked in and said, I wish I recorded my grandmother when she used to talk, when we used to talk.
100%.
Absolutely.
I think about that. I think I have one, imagine a cassette recording with my grandma on it.
The cassette?
Yes. I don't know who captured that, but I was like, we got like, well, it's hiding in somebody's house. Yeah, thinking about.
Why y'all treating grandma like she in an interrogation? Hold on, grandma. Hold on. Let me
bless
put
her
this.
heart.
Hold on.
When she was alive, that's what she had. So people tried to do it, but now it's so easy. Pick up your phone, listen, sit down, kind of rest at their knee. There's a saying about that to learn, because God gifted them, a few more years ahead of you, so you don't make those same mistakes, or that you learn from their life experience. So we need to go back to really honing in on trying to utilize it for ourselves, but allowing other people to also kind of glean from their wealth of knowledge.
Absolutely. My sister Karen Carter. Karen, you said, I am the matriarch of my family. I love and tell the great stories of our family sheroes and ancestors. My daughters are now telling their great stories. We keep legacies alive. That's why I love Karen. That's why I'm loving it, Karen. Come on, sis.
That's what it's
about. My LA sister right there, y'all. That is dope right there. Mimi, you said, I love being a beautiful, intelligent Black woman, and I love all my sisters in the chat and beyond. Awesome. There we go, Mimi. There we go. That's what it is. And then Tiana also said, Farajii, my grandma has some stories that were too funny. Absolutely. But when grandma tells stories, my grandma used to tell the funniest stories, because she used to insert, she'd be like, yeah, so this happened. I ain't like that woman.
They're unfiltered. After a certain age, they just say it, tell it like it is. It's unfiltered and it's the best. I love that about my grandma.
I ain't like her spirit. My grandma would be like,
the whole nasty
right about her.
You're like, wait a minute, grandma. Calm that down. No, I had two separate, real different grandmas. I had a very church-going, a love Jesus grandma, and I had a smoking, cussing, play dominoes grandma.
Oh, those are best grandmas.
I love the best of both worlds.
You need both.
Yes, exactly.
My grandmother was a balance between the church. She'll talk about the church, but she'll remind you of the street.
Don't let her have to go back there, right? Don't let her.
My grandmother was 4 feet. Less than about 100 pounds. You know what I'm saying? She was a small frame woman. But when she walked into the room, her energy and her personality was like, oh, you don't mess with her. You don't mess with Miss Brown. No, you don't mess with Miss Brown. No. Miss Brown, whatever you need, Miss Brown. She'd be like, boy, and she her little fist, smack you upside. I'm like, Grandma, put the fist down. Nobody afraid of you, Grandma. I am, but nobody else.
Right.
You know what I mean? So big shout out to all the mothers, the grandmothers, but more importantly, big shout out to all the women. This month, we're going to do our due diligence here on the show, Suzette, to talk about some powerful women that are putting out some powerful stories. And, we want to highlight that this month. So big shout out to all the women. This is going to be an incredible month. Just like Black History Month was an incredible month. This month should be a call to action for us to understand and to get into a better respect for the woman. Because when we learn understanding that woman, that is going to be important. I think June is also for what? June is for Father's
Day. Music and Father's Day.
Father's Day. I know that's because I know some brothers. Right. What about the man? Trust me, brothers.
It's coming. Yeah,
it's coming. We got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we're going to be checking in with the Capitol Hill correspondent from the Griot, Ashley Banks, to give us some updates on some of the other big stories of the past week. We're going to get her some updates about the student loan case that's being determined by the Supreme Court and more. So stay with us. That conversation will come up here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol,
we're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. Now it's time for us to get some midweek updates with the Capitol Hill correspondent for the Griot, Ashley Banks, and we're continuing the conversation with my sister, Suzette Speaks, as well. But Ashley, welcome back to the show. Good to see you, Ashley. How are you this afternoon?
I'm doing well. Good to see you, Farajii, and good to see you, Suzette.
Hey, Ashley.
So, all right, Ashley, let's talk about first and foremost this thing. And I'm so happy to have both of you on here because y'all are attorneys. I know you are still an attorney in training there, Ashley, but it's going to happen. So I'm not even sweating that part. But talk to us about this student loan case that's being reviewed by the Supreme Court. Where are we right now? Because I know the case started to get its review yesterday. So where are we with that?
That's correct. So on Tuesday, I actually attended the oral argument for the Biden versus Nebraska case, and then there was the Department of Education versus Brown case, and they were two student loan cases. So in the Biden versus Nebraska case, we have 6 states, Republican-led states, that basically halted this Biden administration plan to forgive loans for eligible borrowers. And basically, they argued that this loan program was unprecedented, that Secretary Miguel Cardona did not have the authority under the HEROES Act to create such a student loan program, and that the court should essentially strike it down. And then we had, what's her name, Elizabeth Perloger, who represented the United States, and essentially said that Secretary Miguel Cardona did have authority to create this plan under the HEROES Act because it was for borrowers who were facing financial hardship during the pandemic. And under the HEROES Act, he has given authority where he can invoke certain things when it comes to revising or waiving statutes that already exist to help Americans who are in need. And so he saw that a lot of people were in need. Obviously, people were losing their jobs. People were losing family members who were the breadwinners in the household. And so people could not pay their student loans. And so the secretary was looking to help those in need. And so I watched the oral arguments yesterday, and it's clear that the conservative justices are not a fan of this plan to forgive student loan debt. And then the other side, you had Justice Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson, who were kind of really challenging Nebraska, the 6 states in this case, and basically asking, do you even have standing in this case? Were you even hurt, harmed by this policy that the Biden administration is putting in place for student borrowers? And honestly, Farajii, it appeared that the attorney for the states was kind of choking a bit because they were ganging up on him at one point and kind of saying, you really don't have standing. But he kept asserting that these states would be financially harmed. Some of their tax laws are wrapped up into the federal tax law. And so if student loans were discharged, then they won't be getting any money. But the justices were saying that that's kind of a self-infliction. The fact that your local tax laws are tied into federal tax laws, that's something that you did. It's not mandatory. So this is clearly a you issue, essentially. But it's not totally clear. So from attending a couple of these oral arguments, it's not necessarily clear cut which way the justices are going to go. As we know, it's more conservative than liberal, right? 6-3 as it pertains to political standing. So it could go either way, but since most of the conservatives are not a fan of this plan, if they can come up with a reason and justify why they believe the education secretary did not have authority to create this policy, then it could be struck down, but it's too early to know. We're just going to have to wait until this decision comes out either during the spring or during the summer. But there were a lot of protests that were taking place right outside of the Supreme Court. I happened to miss the protest. It was taking place literally during the oral arguments. But I did catch up with somebody afterwards who let me know that Maxwell Frost was there, Ayanna Pressley, and a couple of other congressional members, just trying to push forward and get people to understand, not that it's in the hands of people, it's in the hands of the justices, but to get other people in this country to have an understanding that this is not something that you should be against. This is something that you should be for. It's essentially going to help us all as a whole to have some of these loans forgiven. And honestly, Biden isn't even eliminating all loans. It's literally $10,000 for people who didn't have a Pell Grant. And if you had a Pell Grant, $20,000, that's not a lot for people who have gone to law school, for people who have gone to medical school, graduate school, gotten PhDs. Like, it's not that much money but for those people who do have the Pell Grants and may have only, gotten their bachelor's degree, which is great. That could eliminate debt for them, which I think is a very beautiful thing. But imagine if the Biden administration said we're eliminating all debt. Like, this, to me, this is pretty asinine. And one more thing I want to mention, Justice Sotomayor, she was basically kind of scolding the defense here, so the attorney representing the states, and saying that this student loan program, like I was saying before, is to benefit the average American person. And she was questioning the defense and saying, why are you now putting it in the hands of justices, people who don't have the expertise to truly decide on what's right when it comes to this? She said they should have been left in the hands of the secretary, of Miguel Cardona, who has an understanding of how student loans are run in this country. And if he decided that it was best to come up with this plan to eliminate loans for those who are eligible, then they should have stuck with that. And honestly, I have to agree with her. Now we have this case in the hands of 9 justices, 6 of whom may not be for this because they are conservative and they're the majority. And they could essentially rule that Biden's program not prevail. And I think that would be a disadvantage to millions of Americans in this country.
So a couple of questions, and I'm glad that you brought this report to us, Ashley. A couple of questions I have is, one is, where does Judge John Roberts stand? Because I know that even though he's a conservative judge, he's one that's kind of serving as the leader of the court, the justices, but at the same time, on some decisions, he's a little bit more liberal than conservative. So what did he have to say during these oral arguments?
Yeah, that's right. He is the Chief Justice. And honestly, he came hard on both of the teams when it came to the government and when it came to the opposing counsel. He did his best to challenge them, to just try and bring out the best in their arguments. I will say that during oral arguments, it's very common that the justices are just very confused as to where each party stands. And so he kind of just played the fence, to be honest, when it came to these oral arguments and asked both sides to clarify their statements. And he challenged them in the best way that he could. But Chief Justice Roberts tends to be really good at not tipping his hand. Like I was able to see with Justice Ketanji Brown and even Justice Kagan, you could tell how they felt during the oral arguments, depending on how they reacted to whoever was giving their oral argument. But Chief Justice Roberts, for the most part, he was pretty much even when it came to challenging both parties. But during the oral arguments also, since he's the chief, he does a lot of dictating which justice goes next, and he was allowing everyone to have their opportunity to get questioning it.
Suzette, we got a few moments before we go to our next pause, but what's your take of all of this?
Yeah, the two key issues that Ashley just explained in terms of standing, as well as whether this falls within the HEROES Act, has very large implications. I know we're right up on a break, but if this was a part of what Congress allowed the executive branch to do under the HEROES Act, then great. But if the court finds that they overstep, there might be other implications as to what other programs the executive branch has instituted vis-a-vis the various secretaries or the White House that may have to kind of go back under consideration as being too far reaching. Whether there is standing is the main issue. When you bring a lawsuit, you have to have some sort of remedy and you have to show that you were hurt. So there's this big question that's hinging on whether these 6 states that have brought this lawsuit are actually owed a remedy. Can they prove that they are being injured by this loan forgiveness? So it's very interesting to see what will happen, and we'll get the answer soon enough in June.
In June. My other question is, did anyone ever bring up and this might be offbeat, this might not be a part of the conversation, but just as much as some of these 6 states are balking about giving money back to students, what about the fact that so many millions of dollars were given to some of these Republican leadership from the PPP loan, and they haven't been called to account for it?
It's very interesting. 1.75 trillion is the student loan debt. And this program would alleviate about approximately 400 to 500 million, according to Brookings Institute. But yes, when it comes to individuals benefiting under the pandemic emergency laws and programs that were created, we see a big problem as opposed to what you've described when there are businesses and corporations that got a lot of money in terms of relief. So this is going to be an interesting question, whether or not this type of relief is something that, again, falls under the HEROES Act. And again, it is affecting about 40 million people, 26 million of which have actually signed up, when I was one of them under the open enrollment. Again, borrowers making $125,000 a year or less, or $250,000 for a married per couple. But yes, we're looking at, again, $10,000 and $20,000, which means a lot to middle-class people and middle-class families. So yes, with all that debt, I'm sorry, again, I'll say 1.75 trillion in total student debt being held here in the United States. Again, about 400 to 500 billion to be forgiven through this program. So we'll see what the justices have to say.
Hey, Ashley, very quickly before we take our pause, I mean, can we compare the PPP loan situation to the student debt situation? Is that relief for relief, or is that totally two different things from your vantage point and what you've been reporting?
So that's not something that was brought up in the courtroom, obviously. But no, I cannot answer that, Farajii, if those are two separate things. I can only report what was being discussed in that courtroom yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we'll continue the conversation with Ashley Banks, Capitol Hill correspondent for the Griot, Suzette Speaks, who our TV host and attorney, and of course with you, as we're talking about this case that has gone before the Supreme Court around student loan debt cancellation. What's your take? Crew, let me know what your thoughts are as the oral arguments, the opening arguments have been given in this case that we may not hear from until June, spring or summertime of this year. What's your take? Stay with us. The conversation continues on the other side here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black
own media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking about the student loan debt cancellation case that is now before the Supreme Court, getting an update on where we are as the case is just getting started. And Ashley Banks, the Capitol Hill correspondent for the Grio, broke it down for us nicely as to what those opening arguments entailed. And of course, giving us her analysis of where this thing may go. Suzette Speaks, our attorney and TV host here, she's given her analysis, and I want to hear from you. What do you think of this as these opening arguments have been given, and the fact that we're going to see the fate of this program in the hands of 9 Supreme Court justices, who Justice Sonia Sotomayor said, why put it in the hands of 9 justices instead of the man that understands how this process works, the Secretary of Education? Big question that I don't think that the defense can really answer. And so we will see how this case plays out. But what's your take on this? Let me know your thoughts. Post your comments in the chat. And of course, we'll try to get to as many of your comments as possible, crew. Let's go to Brian Christian. Brian checked in and said the conservative SCOTUS judges are hypocrites to themselves. Some of them had to deal with student loan debts. Yeah, that's the pushback I get, Ashley, that I don't understand, to Brian's point. I don't understand, why this is such a problem. Is it based just simply because of the economics of how states are trying to figure this thing out? Or is it just in terms of principle, Republicans are feeling like, you know what, the Biden administration is quote unquote overreaching its power to the point where it's trying to intervene in people's affairs. Y'all trying to give these students breaks. But aren't students supposed to be an investment in the next generation, an investment into the future? I'm not understanding the rationale in the whole thought process behind rejecting canceling student loans from the Republicans' point of view.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to speak with a couple of people, and they said this is simply a political stunt by members of the GOP. They just don't want to see the Biden administration have such a big win. And then there's that other side where I'm sure you've heard Republicans or conservatives say, well, if I had to pay my student loans, these people should have to pay their student loans as well. And that's kind of what we see with the Department of Education versus the Brown case, where there's 2 students who were ineligible to receive the student loan forgiveness program that Biden proposed. And so they were upset that their loans were within a private sector and that they didn't qualify to have their loans eliminated. And so basically it's if I can't have my loans eliminated, or if I already paid for my loans, then why are other people getting off scotch-free? And it's just that, to me, that's not a fair argument. Yes, it's unfortunate that you may not have qualified for the program, but don't knock somebody else's blessing just because you feel like you're not going to be able to get off, right? That you're not going to be able to have your loans eliminated. You just went through a different process. Get educated. It happens, and hopefully you'll see a breakthrough at some point. But right now, the people who are eligible did not have these private loans, and they maybe also didn't come from the same background as you did, right? And so, but there are different arguments here. But from what I'm hearing, it's simply, my loans were paid off. You need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. We are not taking handouts from the government. Get your act together. But what they're missing is that people were not living their best lives before the pandemic. A lot of people had gone to college thinking they're going to get those jobs that are going to be able to help them pay off their student loans. Not just jobs. We're not talking about going to Walmart, getting a job there, working at McDonald's, but actually getting a job in the field that they studied while they were in college. And that didn't happen for a lot of people. And then the pandemic hits, people get sick, they lose family members, they lose their jobs, and now they really can't afford to pay those loans. And so the government saw that and decided, hey, I know we can't eliminate all of your loans, but at least let us try to help relieve the stress that you may be under due to financial hardship. And so it's just a pity that we have some Republicans who just don't want to see that happen.
As the great DJ Khaled said, they don't want to see us win.
Not the DJ Khaled.
Right. All right. Here's my other question. Though. What about the point? And I've heard this one from folks, Ashley and Suzette. Ashley, I want to get your take on this first. But what about the conversation about schools being too high, the tuition and cost of schools being so high, and that there should be a review, or there should be some level of like a cap for certain schools, because the loans wouldn't be so high, the loans wouldn't be such a problem if the cost of education wasn't as high as it is. Was that brought up in the conversation?
It wasn't. I think it should have been brought up in the conversation, but also if it were brought up, it kind of would be a moot point, because that's not the point of this, the oral arguments, right? They're there to argue that the Biden administration's plan is legit, and the defense is saying we're going to suffer financial harm. So that's not the place for that conversation. But I believe the conversation needs to be had. For years, we've had activists saying that we need a universal system. There's universal healthcare in other countries, making sure that students go to college for free. Like you said earlier, the next generation is investing in their education so that they can progress and really be, contributing members of society. And if people have to put out hundreds of thousands of dollars just to go to school, some people just can't afford that, and they're not going. But then the conversation would have to deal with the public sector and the private sector. Obviously, the private schools can do whatever they want to do. But when it comes to public schooling, public colleges, I believe that there should be a cap. I believe that, obviously as inflation is rising, the cost of living is rising, the cost of schooling is rising. But I really do think it's unfair, because other people's salaries aren't rising, right? With inflation and the cost of living increasing. But I think that is a discussion that needs to be had. But we live in a capitalist society. And so honestly, it's a big moneymaker for states.
That's sad.
And just people's salaries who work at these universities.
That's sad. I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
Actually, you don't need to hear that. That's sad. Suzette, what's your take on that? Schools and tuition costs being too damn high.
Well, there's truth to it. I mean, there are people that have argued for quite some time now that the cost of education is just out of control. And of course, there are bidding wars, there are pricing wars in terms of the perception of how valuable a specific institution is. People wouldn't want, some universities argue, a cheap sounding or cheap costing university. There's that kind of, marketing that goes along with your sticker price. But this is something that needs to come up in terms of Congress. So if this is something that I think the American people want to see, then it becomes a question as to, lobbying your congressional leaders so that they start to, work on legislation and get something passed with this regard. But it would be very difficult, I think, in its kind of free market kind of politics and in our system. People can set whatever price they want to. But if there's something with regard to public education that can be done, it would have to be either state legislatures or our U.S. Congress.
Absolutely.
Jump in real quick for Farajii.
Go ahead.
Suzette is saying here, it's up to Congress for sure. And we saw a couple years back where Bernie Sanders, he proposed a bill for free college and the cancellation of student debt, but he received a lot of backlash, people just calling him an extreme liberal who just doesn't understand how the economy works. But there are quite a few people that are in Congress who do want to see colleges free of charge for American citizens and for every American borrower to not be in debt.
Damn, man! If Bernie Sanders was president, let me go to a couple of the crew remarks. Instructor Joe, you said the cost of education is increasing, but the quality of education is not, and the value of that education is steadily depreciating. So I think that's the other part of this. I mean, it's probably unspoken, but you're paying for something, and then you're not really able to get the greatest benefit from. But then I think that is juxtaposed to what Chris mentioned. Chris Big, my guy, you said get a degree in something that's so sought after. You don't need loans like risk management or electrical engineering and patent law. So we're talking about a lot of money is being spent, and then you still have students, Ashley, who are going into these colleges, racking up these prices, and then they're for courses or for majors that they may not even use. They may not even take advantage of it. You know what I'm saying? So personal choice. I don't know if that comes up into the discussion as well. But how big of an emphasis should we place on that?
I feel like people should be able to choose what they want, right? I hear Chris, and I think that, it's kind of practical. But at the same time, if I'm going to be investing 4 years of my life out of university and I'm already spending money, it's going to be on something I want. I'm fortunate that I was able to attend Morgan State University and receive a bachelor's in journalism, and to actually become a journalist was a huge success. But I also know a lot of people who attended university with me and wanted to become journalists, but just couldn't land that gig. And here we are literally 10 years post-graduation, and they're just having to work whatever gig that they can find. They were great journalists. They just did not, connect well, or weren't able to land the position that they wanted, or lacked resources. I know attending that HBCU 10 years ago, we didn't have the resources that the university has today. Thank you to President David Wilson. But it depends on the school you're going to as well, not just the degree that you're seeking. So we have, the University of Maryland College Park and the Towson University in Maryland. And those people, if they're attending the university for journalism, they have programs in place for these people to have mentors. And by the time they're about to graduate, some of them already have jobs lined up. And so, we can try to hold people responsible, the ones who are actually choosing their major, but it's the universities as well. That if they're accepting students' money, they also need to be setting them up for success, not for them to just get a degree and have to fend for themselves. It's a part of a process, right? If you're investing in an education, you're not just investing in the education just to have it. You're investing in the education so that you can be employed in that field afterward. And so I think a lot of schools do fail students in that capacity, especially minorities. Absolutely.
Ashley Banks, Capitol Hill correspondent for the Griot. Ashley, we thank you so much for that great report, and we'll certainly bring you back on for other updates surrounding this case. And for some of the other stories, I know you got another story on hand in terms that we have to talk about, which is the whole idea of FBI informants. Woo! That's a good one. I can't wait to talk about that. So we'll bring you back sometime very, very soon to have that conversation. But Ashley, thank you so much for your report, and we truly appreciate it.
Sounds good. Thank you, Farajii, and see you, Suzette.
Bye. See you soon.
Suzette, oh my gosh. What can I say, Suzette? Another great show.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Very quickly, Suzette, do you want to speak on that personal choice piece?
I think we have to go back to trade schools. There's so much more. I think it's probably too much for the time we have left, but I'm thinking about everybody doesn't have the same scholastic ability or aptitude. And so I think we do need liberal arts educations for a variety of reasons, because if I'm looking at the numbers in terms of the MBAs we're cranking out and the amount of people that get laid off and kind of the numbers in the book being more important than the people. I think you need humanities. I think you need liberal arts. I think, some of that education is very important, but I do think sometimes people who need the economic boost don't have the luxury of being able to take some of those. But we need social workers. We need people who do mental health. We need all kinds of folks have value in this society. Everybody cannot necessarily be, trained in a highly technical area. That's why I like to say you got to go back to the basics. Not everybody's even going to go to college. So let's give them options before they even get there and start taking on this debt. Because there are a lot of tradespeople that make good money and can sustain themselves and a family. So there's so much more I want to say, but I know we're out of time.
Out of time. Suzette Speaks, my sister. Make sure y'all check her out. Suzette Speaks on her YouTube channel. Subscribe to Suzette.
Yes.
Continue to show support for her as we celebrate Women's History Month, especially, and celebrating women who tell their story. Suzette, thank you so much, sis. God willing, we'll connect with you next week.
Yes, can't wait. See everybody soon. Take care of yourself. Thanks for watching.
Thank you. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. I thank each and every one of you, my culture crew, for being a part of the conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to my team, King Keenan, my man Joel, and of course, my control room. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Folks, stay tuned. Up next is Roland Martin Unfiltered. Make sure you do your part. to support us here at Black Star Network. Go to the website, Black Star Network, download the app, and follow us on all social media platforms. And, of course, support us financially and share the content. And follow me, yours truly, at The Real Farajii on Instagram and Farajii on Twitter. And let's continue to build the community. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong. Stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Peace.